So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us here this afternoon. Oh.
I just need to make sure that we know that every meeting is being recorded.
Okay.
So the recording has started at this point. So you'll see on the top of your screen that it tells you pretty plainly that it's started recording. This is just so that other folks that are on the committee can see it when they're not able to attend. So thank you, Jacob.
Yep. Thanks, Alana. So thanks everyone for joining us here, our Study Advisory Committee number 4 for our Ballston Spa Pedestrian and Bicycle Master Plan. I just wanted to start off by, mentioning, I'm sure most of you on the call have heard that the mayor stepped down last night. But I just wanted to point out that this study is moving ahead, business as usual. We'll continue to finalize our plan and tweak the recommendations as we had planned, and we have a final public meeting that we're going to tentatively schedule on this call and finalize this afternoon. So I just wanted to point that out and mention, I don't think that we'll have any issues, but just wanted to make sure that the conversation this afternoon kind of sticks to discussion and comments on our plan, and make sure we steer clear of any kind of political opinions or debate. So I didn't think that we'd have any issues again, but just wanted to point that out for abundance of caution. Make sure we stay on track this afternoon. And that's it for me. I'll hand it over to Alana to kick off the presentation and go over our draft plan.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jacob. I just got a message from both Liz and Ray that the number isn't working for them. So let me see quickly if there's something I'm doing as far as admitting. Oh, it looks like Liz made it in. So let me see if we can get Ray going.
Yeah, I was on a Cisco WebEx thing. There's too many platforms here.
Yeah, I hear you there. All right, let me just see if I can get great, that's information here. Sorry about that, everybody. Before we really got started, I was telling folks that I was on a Zoom with my sisters and my brother, and we were struggling ourselves, just it's been a year and a half and we're still struggling some days with this stuff. Let me see if I can just call in. Okay. Okay. Again, so as we're trying to get Ray able to get on the phone with us, thank you for being able to make it today. Super helpful in being able to go through the report kind of together, talk through some of the recommendations, see where things fell with the committee, and just kind of, like I said, step through the report itself. One of the things Jacob mentioned is that we definitely are looking to schedule that final public meeting. That we'd like to do this before we start getting into the holiday season. So we're actually looking at 2 different dates right now. One of them is, so we're looking at November 17th and November 18th to have a virtual public meeting. So we can hopefully look at our calendars and determine which one of those dates is going to be better for all involved. Again, that would be the 17th or the 18th of November. And I believe they're a Wednesday and a Thursday. Let me just double check that. Yep, Wednesday the 17th at 7 or Thursday the 18th at 7. So just take a peek at your calendars. And let me see if I can get Ray in here really quickly.
So who can make the 17th? How about that?
Yeah, thank you.
Feel free to.
Sean
17.
Raymond here, I can.
Christine Fitzpatrick, I can.
I can.
It looks like a lot of people raise their hands. What about the 18th?
Also good.
Also good for me too. I'm sorry, I don't know how to raise my hand, so I'm just gonna have to.
You can just do that. That's fine.
Sean Raymond here.
Old school is fine.
I'd rather go with the 17th, but I could do the 18th.
Okay.
This is Bernadette. I can do the 18th. I have a meeting on the 17th through kind of Milton.
Bernadette, can you say that again?
Hello.
Oh, good, we got you. Okay, sounds like Ray has been able to join. Great, thank you.
I
Bernadette,
think Bernadette's muted.
Oh, is that better? Oh, gosh. Sorry.
Saratoga County could do either of those, 17th or 18th.
Again, this is Bernadette. I can do the 18th only. The 17th, I have a planning board meeting in Milton.
All right, so Kathy, you took the poll, so let us know what seemed to be either or. It
It's
seems
half and half. I don't know. We may want to maybe ask those people who couldn't make it today and just double check too.
Yep, let's take care of that. Okay, that sounds good. So we'll let everybody know in the short term so we can get it on the calendars and making sure that we are having everything publicized with enough time for anybody who wants to participate to be able to do so. The other thing that we certainly want to make sure we've done is get the draft report to its final draft report version. Thank you for everybody who was able to provide comments. Everything is extremely helpful when we get feedback, so thank you very much for that. And we will respond with the updated report. Hopefully, it's not going to be the end of this week, but very early next week with that information to both the committee and then being able to put that on the website for anybody and all to view at that point. So
you want us to hold both dates at 7 o'clock until we hear. Am I getting that right?
yes, please.
Okay. And are you going to send out a doodle poll or whatever they call those things?
Yeah, I can do that. That way we'll get everybody in the committee. So just respond again. That way we'll make sure we can try to find that best date for as many folks as we can.
I just had a question. The site was developed by you. How long do we have access to that? I mean,
that is a question, and let me double check on and get back to you with it. So let me write that down.
Just wondering.
So I'm going to share my screen and just kind of pop into the actual recommendations or potential projects list, and we can kind of walk our way through them and discuss as needed. So here, I apologize if my head starts. I've got my camera on this screen and then I've got everything else over here. So you're going to see this side if you see me at all here pretty soon. So here we go. All right. So like I said, hop to the recommendations themselves and kind of talk through some of these things. Make myself do my way through. Oh, Adobe not responding. Thank you. Okay, so the plan recommendations themselves. So the first item here is really talking through the or completing an ADA transition plan within the community itself. The work that was done by the volunteers to actually get out and do the sidewalk assessment is an excellent base for that. But the first step again would be, or the first recommendation there is to adjust or to update that ADA, update that into an ADA transition plan within the study area and the village itself. The next item on the potential plans and projects is the construction of a sidewalk on the north side of East High Street from Hyde Boulevard to Eastern Avenue. There's that section of the roadway that doesn't have any connection to the rest of the sidewalk network. So it's really just that piece, and it transitions along where the soccer fields are and then across the railroad tracks in front of the apartment building area, and then would connect to the existing sidewalk that's already there and provide that connection for everybody. The third recommendation here, complete the sidewalk network on one side of West High Street from Charlton Street to the Saratoga County office buildings. This one is it's kind of a big lift. So within the project discussion and the table itself, it was identified as a longer term project just because, as you all know, and when you're going through that area, the grades change pretty drastically on both sides of the roadway. There's definitely some right-of-way constraints with guide rail and some drainage areas as well. So this one would definitely take a more detailed design look to make sure it's being done in the right spot as far as the side of the roadway, but it was identified as an important connection by the committee to make sure that people within the village are able to get to those community services that are at the county building. So item number 4, to complete the sidewalk on the southeast side of Malta Avenue to Hyde Boulevard and install a high visibility crosswalk on the west leg of Malta Avenue at Ralph Street with flashing beacons and approach signage. That would help to provide the connection to Kelly Park from other areas in the community. That's one spot that just doesn't have, it's not a complete sidewalk network. So it's the idea is to complete that network and provide access down to the Kelly Park area. Make this a little bigger so it's maybe easier for all of us. 5, so we're starting, these are mostly sidewalks at this point, and before we transition into kind of having the multimodal as well, but complete the sidewalk on the north side of Malta Avenue from East Grove Street to Ralph Street. So again, it's another piece of that connection that's really just missing on Malta Avenue, and the idea would be to continue to fill that in, especially since that's an area with the county road that a lot of people are coming into the village on. So you want to make sure you have that separated facility for pedestrians and motor vehicles. This recommendation number 6 here is restriping East High Street from Oak Street to High Boulevard with 10-foot travel lanes and 5-foot bike lanes, or wider travel lanes with Sharrow symbols, and to provide wayfinding signage directing Zim Smith Trail users to High Boulevard to reach downtown. So this would be the piece of East High Street that would be connecting the end of the Zim Smith Trail actually into the village itself. So Saratoga County had been working on a plan that they have been progressing to actually extend the Zim Smith Trail from where it is, the end near Oak Street and into Spa Park. So they have a preferred alignment for the trail itself, and this would hopefully be able to connect into that preferred alignment from that Saratoga County is currently working through to have a final plan recommendation.
Hey, Alana, I see
yeah.
Liz, you have your hand raised. Do you have a comment or question?
Yeah, I had a question. Are these in order of priority?
They are not in order of priority.
Okay.
They're just working through.
Okay.
Okay, so that's getting the getting Zim Smith Trail users into the village. The rest of these next couple recommendations actually complete that connection into kind of the downtown business district area. One being, well, it's number 7 on here actually, install a high visibility crosswalk on the east leg of East High Street at Hyde Boulevard with approach signage. So right there where Hyde and East High Street meet, making sure there's a crossing to get people across, well, East High Street. And then widen Hyde Boulevard between East High Street and Grove Street to provide a sidewalk on each side of the roadway, bike lanes, and separate the travel lanes with center line striping. This is a mitigation or a project that could either have on-street parking or eliminate on-street parking. And it drastically affects cost, whether the parking is maintained or not, just because you're widening the roadway, making room for vehicle travel, bicycle travel, and then, with or without the parking, and then having the sidewalks themselves. So this could be based upon recommendations of the committee and the public, either maintain or don't maintain parking, have parking on one side of the roadway or the other. So there's a little flexibility, I guess might be the way to put it, in how this would actually move forward as a project. The one thing that I know was commented on in the past, as in years and years ago, is center line striping. And on Hyde Boulevard specifically, that it had been put in place and then removed based upon kind of, well, a dislike of the center line striping itself. One of the things that we did in the text of the report, though, was to note that center line striping is a good thing in some areas and maybe not a good thing in others. So on roadways that do have maybe a slightly higher volume or a perceived higher speed or a lot of width to work with, it is good to have that center line striping to provide greater clarification for drivers to know exactly where they need to be, but also just as a reminder that it's not an open expanse to just use. Right? We need to kind of stay focused in our lanes and pay attention a little bit to what's going on, I guess.
Do you know if, when that was done, because it was before my time, if there was also markings for the parking spaces?
I do not, I want to say it was on the order of like 20 years ago, just because we heard anecdotally about it more than anything else. So I don't know if it included the parking striping as well.
Liz, I might have brought that up, and this is John Ballet, and I think I brought that up in our walk, but It was maybe 20 or 25 years ago that I recall, and I don't recall parking lines put in place. It was just they put a double yellow line down the road, and it was removed, I think, within a week.
It's pretty quick.
Maybe parking spaces in a bike lane would narrow that down, and then it might not be as offensive, but.
Exactly. You know, more than one thing, basically. So in addition to that space on Hyde Boulevard between East High Street and Grove Street, so we're continuing to make our way into the downtown from the Zim Smith Trail along East High Street, then along Hyde Boulevard, and then turning along Grove Street. So providing wayfinding signage, sharrows, and share the road signs on Grove Street between Hyde Boulevard and Pine Street, directing bicyclists to downtown and the Malta Avenue parking lot. There's a couple pieces of missing sidewalk on Grove Street, so the recommendation is also that those missing sections of sidewalk be infilled for the full pedestrian connection along that section, but providing the signage and striping in order to direct pedestrians, bicyclists from the Zim Smith Trail continuing into the downtown area. The last piece of the kind of that downtown connection from the Zim Smith Trail into that Malta Avenue parking lot is really to provide direction for individuals to go through the parking lot and into Malta Ave. So I'm actually going to go onto Google and show it that way. Let me know if you didn't see the change of my screen from Google Earth. But essentially, what we're talking about, this last piece, and there are graphics in the report that highlight it, but we're going to try and focus them in a little bit better for everybody to be able to visualize it better, is we've come from Oak Street, where the Zim Smith Trail currently kind of ends. So along East Hyde Street, turned onto Hyde Boulevard and provided sidewalks and bicycle lanes and some center line striping along this area. And then turned the corner onto Grove Street with some wayfinding signage, some share the road signs, as well as, sharrows, in order to direct bicyclists along Grove Street. And then the last piece is this connection right here from Pine Street into where the Malta Avenue parking lot is. There's already some bicycle parking spaces at that parking lot, and this connection would kind of formalize getting people into the downtown area. There is already a vehicle connection here, but the recommendation would be to provide wayfinding signage in order to continue and identify that path, and then to construct a side path for pedestrians, like an asphalt sidewalk for pedestrians, so that the bicycle traffic and which can use that very, very, very low volume little vehicle connection here would be how the bicyclists would go, and then we would separate pedestrians so that they're on an asphalt path that would go alongside the existing roadway connection with some level of pedestrian lighting, also to make it more inviting and to make it more noticeable that this is the way that we're getting to downtown from the trail. So that was kind of the Zim Smith Trail piece. Are there, thoughts, comments, questions, concerns?
Hey, Alana, looks like Nathan has his hand up.
Hi, I just have a question on the very end of that recommendation. Would you direct the bicyclists onto Malta Ave, or just swing by like the Ballston Community Center?
We had suggested swinging by the community center.
Okay.
For that connection.
And then for Grove Street, you mentioned Charros. Is there a thought about maybe making, that's a pretty skinny road. Is there a thought about like making that one way potentially?
The roadway itself?
Yes. So you have room for bicyclists and for cars?
We had not thought that through as far as a one-way section. Due to the volume, it seemed like Sharrows would be an acceptable method, but that's definitely something worth, you know, writing down and putting in as far as a comment goes. Should the traffic increase or the bicycles increase, then it might be certainly taking a peek at.
Yeah, I know the school's right there, so you might want to, if there is a thought about making that one way, just ask the school what way they want that to go, and that's probably, or ask them if they want it two ways.
Mm-hmm.
This is Christine Fitzpatrick. I have to say that's a very effective way of showing this, you know, with Google Earth and moving the cursor. And I think when we're talking about, when we're doing this presentation on Zoom, in general, it would be very helpful if you could show all of these recommendations, if you could show them in that manner.
For sure.
And the one thing I would suggest is that you get, if there's any way you can do it, is you get a cursor that is colored.
Okay.
Okay, so either bright yellow or bright pink or bright red, or well, actually yellow or orange is the best, so that people can follow it visually. Thank you.
I also just had a comment in the document itself. I think it would be helpful for each of the examples you gave, you know, at the top of the toolkit, to show a picture.
Okay.
Along with those, because not everybody's, you know, familiar with these, and a visual, you know, I think would really help.
No problem.
I mean, I think that's really true. I live, you know, you can practically see my house from this because I live right near the Malta Avenue School, and I didn't even realize that there was this access point through the, and I've walked this area, you know, neighborhood for 20 years. I didn't even realize there was this access point down to the Ballston, through the Ballston Area Community Center. I didn't realize it was public access.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, the property belongs to the village, so that shouldn't be a problem anyways.
No, I know, but what I'm saying is I was unaware. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anyway, and so I think it's really good to point it out that it, you know, I mean, maybe I'm just not paying attention, but I would bet I'm not alone in not knowing that it's there.
Yeah, I don't think it's used for vehicles normally, just for like deliveries and stuff like that, which will make it, you know, a safe point for pedestrians and bicyclists to go. There isn't traffic there, in other words.
Right.
Yeah, I think there's actually some no through traffic sign there now.
Right.
Perfect.
Oh, Alana, I had a couple other questions and then a kind of a formatting thing. But I didn't know about exploring working with the school district to get a parking lot in at the south end of the soccer fields between Eastern and Hyde. That's really underutilized space. And my thought there was if we did make the Sim-Smith connection, people could park there rather than Oak Street and alleviate some of the parking trouble on Oak Street.
That's a great idea. I know the county has stated before that they do have one of the biggest complaints they have from the Sim-Smith Trail is the parking that happens on Oak Street. So that's an excellent recommendation.
I think they're planning a parking lot at the end of Oak Street, but I think, you know, Scott's suggestion is a better parking lot, you know, and in particular if we have an access, because I think they might, I don't remember exactly, but they think they said they might have to use eminent domain to get the spot on Oak Street. And, you know, if the school was more cooperative. I mean, even this end piece outside of the swing area is a pretty good sized chunk of land that isn't being used for anything.
Yeah, that swing set's got to be the largest swing set I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And I think I've only ever seen one kid actually swinging on it.
Well,
but I thought too that would help if we lost some parking on Hyde with some of the other changes there, and it was replaced with a parking lot in that same vicinity.
Yeah, well, you can see I live right there, and I too have very seldom seen any, you know, when the seats and the swings were still used, very seldom. The children go down to the nicer playground in Kelly Park.
That parking lot will eventually get filled up with Bark soccer moms and dads.
Yep.
Right.
Well,
I think that's okay. I mean, that's a limited Saturdays during the year, and then the rest of the time, you know, certainly could be used for the Zoom Smith.
Actually, the pattern that I've observed is very seldom do people park on the east side of Hyde. Now, that may partially be due to some of my neighbors putting stakes right along the road, but it's the preferable spot parking is nose in towards the field, or parking along the you know, the railroad access over here. And you know, I have pictures of a soccer game going on where nobody's parked on our side of the street. So I don't think that would be much, at least from Grove to East Hyde, much of a sacrifice if we did away with one and saved ourselves some money.
Right.
Looks like Jason.
And then,
oh no, go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, just another comment on the recommendations. We had in the Complete Streets seminar, Planning for Places had shown continuing the bike path along the, I think it's a National Grid easement straight out into East High rather than following along Oak Street. And I didn't know if we wanted to include that option in this report also, just so that didn't get lost.
Right. So, and one of the things that we do as the county is finishing up their work, we do want to recognize what their preferred alignment is for the connection of the Zim Smith, which is essentially crossing Oak, coming over a little bit into kind of this open space area. And the preferred, like I said, at this point is to have an off-street connection that would travel along the east side of the rail line. So that would be kind of the full Zim Smith piece, but you are talking about
no, I'm talking about right where your cursor is, and Kathy,
yes,
maybe can refresh my memory too. But they were going up the east side of the railroad track and then just coming down that sort of steep embankment with a little switchback, and they were landing right about where you said the county would probably cross.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. We need to make sure that piece is not lost as far as that goes. Thank you.
Yeah, that was part of the Complete Streets, and there were some comments that was kind of a steep embankment to have bicycles and pedestrians going up and down right there, and that it probably was preferable to make the crossing or connection at Oak Street. So it's just a consideration.
It would be very difficult to make that ADA compliant.
Yes.
So,
And then just a formatting question. I think we're going to talk about priority and prioritizing the list, but then also it seemed like the stuff that wasn't Zim Smith related, there was really no, you could sort of pick and choose which project you wanted to do, but the Zim Smith items, they had to be done in some type of sequence, or else it didn't really make any sense. So I thought breaking out the other recommendations versus the Zim Smith connection recommendations.
Yeah, I think you're right, that the goal was to provide kind of pieces that were more like bite size, do some smaller things that can be put in place in different places. But yeah, the Zim Smith one was kind of a bigger nut to chew and became an overall a bigger project.
Right, I think you can still, there are ways to piecemeal it, but you got to start at one end.
Right. Thank you. And then Jason, isn't that what we were saying, Jacob, that Jason had his hand up perhaps?
Yeah, Jason has his hand up, so I don't know if maybe he's got some more insight onto the county piece.
Yeah, and I'll just, thank you, everyone. As of right now, we've got a feasibility study complete. We are proposing a parking lot on the east side of the end of Oak Street. Some of the most significant complaints we get on, the trail, the whole entire length is that parking down at Oak Street. So we're looking to pull that out in front of those houses, come out to the end of Oak Street. There was, I don't know, I heard some talk about the easement. I don't know if you were referring to the water line easement. I can't really point on the screen, but that extends directly across from Oak Street, or are we referring to the power line easement that's sort of adjacent to the track south of East High Street?
I think it was the power line that was referenced in Scott's comment.
Yeah, and we had taken a look at that as well. So you're talking south of East High Street, correct? That right there where your pointer just was? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And just, generally from the county's point of view, we do have an application in right now for possible funding to go from here up to Malta Avenue. We are, currently working on the 2022 proposed budget at the county, and we are discussing options to get this project underway. So the county's fully committed to the Zim Smith, and we're going to move this forward as fast as we can. Obviously, this is a very significant expansion north, and I see it being a phased approach, but we're fully committed to this project.
Jason, exactly where will the trail go? Is it along this little thing here and then jogs to the right and then continues north? Is that?
I don't know how. Yeah, I don't know, Liz, how I could share, but slide south, whoever's got the pointer right now. Yeah. We're gonna cross at the end, do a flashing beacon, slide east right there, a proposed flashing beacon, go down the north side of East High Street. So travel that pointer to the west. Yep, keep going. Right before that steep grade in front of the railroad tracks, we're gonna try to hug the railroad as tight as we can. Go ahead, slide the whole screen up, whoever's got it. Keep going. Come down someplace, just south of the ball fields. Use the east side of the ball field access. And these are all things we're looking at right now. Keep going. Come out, shoot down the south side of Malta Ave, and then cross over, go down the sewer pump station road. Nope, east. Yep, you got it. Back just a touch. And then go down to the pump station and then work on the sewer line easement from there to Saratoga.
Okay. So you're not going down the other utility easement that's on the map there to the east. You're going more along the railroad.
Yeah, I wouldn't say, I would have a hard time. You're talking the one that's between the two residences or the residence in the garage right there?
Yeah.
I wouldn't propose that, I think, all the way along the Zim, we've tried to minimize the impacts. That is a water line easement. It's got the water line underneath it going right up through that gentleman's yard. We're not in favor of that.
No, no, I was just thinking maybe cutting over. I mean, there's a.
Oh, yeah, we do have some wetlands in that area. So you're talking north of the gentleman's house, but south of the ball fields.
Right.
Yeah, where that ultimately lays in there will ultimately depend on how much right away we could acquire and what we need to do there. So
Yeah.
anywhere's in that block you just outlined. I don't know exactly. I mean, we've got a preliminary route, but where exactly, whoever just highlighted that area, wherever it will land someplace in there, we hope.
Okay. Yeah. So, you know, the plans are to extend it, but there isn't the connection to the village unless, you know, we put it in.
At this time, no. I mean, our priority is, you know, as we're working down in Half Moon as well, Mechanicville is try to get this spine built through to the northern part of the county.
Mm-hmm. Everybody wants it.
Yeah. Yeah, and we definitely like the flashing beacon at the crossing. Always a good thing for high usage. So
absolutely.
And also,
and I would hope,
traffic.
Hopefully we get, you know, I see this as sort of an ancillary parking lot there. I like the ideas of trying to get something over around the ball fields. You know, and then as we move north, we will look at parking lots for every intersection with roadways. So we have a significant parking lot proposed at North Line, a parking lot outside the park gate up at Spa State Park. So one thing we've learned with the ZIM, I would say, is, you know, you can never provide too much parking. Right there, whoever's got the pointer.
Yeah, and up in this area.
Just east, yeah, a little bit east of there. There's a dry spot. Keep going east. We're looking down in there for a parking lot as well.
Okay. There's the little one right there at
Yep.
Race Crossing.
And State Parks has also expressed interest in working together with us on possibly a parking lot there as well.
Great. Thank you.
It'll be done next year, right?
Nah, we probably won't even need that long. Probably only take a couple months.
Oh, okay, good.
So right now we're looking at the numbers we're looking at. I mean, we obviously have a pending grant application out there right now. You know, I would say if it depending on how this year's budget goes for 2022, if some of those items are approved, we could be looking at, you're probably, I would say 18 months to 2 years away from full design and right-of-way acquisition. If we receive funding that we've applied for just this southern piece, then we would start immediately on that section.
Thank you. I appreciate it very much.
How do I get rid of raising my hand?
That's a good question.
I think the same button that you raised it with, maybe.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
One of my questions was, you know, the high visibility intersections. You know, you described one on item 12, but we found many more intersections that could use improvements. So, I mean, something to note that this application, you know, this can be applied to other areas, or maybe even show, you know, where there are numerous places in the village, in the study area, that could use better, more visible intersections. And that would be something potentially the village could implement themselves.
Yeah, doing the striping and signage tends to be a lower cost item, and of course, the one thing that always has to be thought about with those is the maintenance aspect of it. And then when it comes to any new type of striping, anything. Well, as you said, for number 12, the recommendation is to install a high visibility crosswalks on all approaches to the Malta Ave Hyde Boulevard intersection with approach signage. So I'm going to turn off roads really quick.
Yeah.
This is one of those locations that we specifically pulled out because Malta Avenue does have a relatively higher volume of traffic entering and exiting the village from that location. So you want to emphasize that there are going to be people crossing in this location, especially as we're talking about completing the connection of the sidewalk on the north side of Malta Ave here, as well as on the south side of Malta Avenue. So completing that pedestrian network at this particular intersection where it's already always stop controlled. So there is already traffic control on all approaches, and providing that additional emphasis that there will be people crossing at this location. I would shy against providing that same level of crossing treatment at just every intersection. Right. Just you do want it to be emphasized at locations where you're expecting a greater number of crossings, as well as you may have a higher speed approach or things like that.
Yeah, but is there something?
But
is there something that is less than that? That, you know, in other words, it would be in these recommendations for normal, you know, lower volume crossings, but still there's a need to designate that there's a crossing.
Sure, and that might be something more of, say, at the at this location right here that we're talking about, it would probably be what we call a ladder bar style of crosswalk. So that's the one where you've got the two verticals, and then it's also got your horizontal connection, so it looks exactly like a ladder. Other options are to do just the just kind of the two bars, so it still emphasizes that there's a crossing, but without quite the same level of emphasis. You can also do the same thing with just the bars themselves, and when those are placed thoughtfully, you actually can end up that vehicles travel between the actual striping of the bars, so there's a little bit less maintenance because they're not always being driven over. So there's that piece of just doing, say, the horizontal stripes instead of the kind of what I'm calling the vertical. So yes, there are multiple levels for sure.
Yeah, I think it would be good to, you know, put them in the toolkit or somewhere that we could reference for use.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and I think, Alana, I was thinking, kind of going back to what Scott mentioned too, like we do have like the first few pages of the plan recommendations are those toolkits. So maybe just like tweaking the formatting and the layout of that to make it seem like a menu items or something like that. So they're kind of really drawn out, might be good. But yeah, I think that's just kind of formatting and layout.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the comments with that had actually been that there are some of those kind of toolkit items that were not actually included as recommendations. They're just part of a toolkit. So that could be tailored so that it is inclusive only of the actual recommendations and not providing confusion about, oh, did we put this in somewhere and I'm just not recommending it. So we can certainly pull out the ones that we didn't actually include as recommendations, if that would clarify things as well.
Yeah, it might. While traveling in Massachusetts and some other areas, I think New Hampshire, you see these freestanding little signs, pedestrians. Is that something that is done in New York State? Because that seemed to me to be I don't know how much they cost, relatively low cost, you know, method. You put something in the middle of the road, a car is going to slow down.
So are you talking about the signs that are essentially typically they say something like yield to pedestrian in crosswalk, and they are right there in the middle of the road. And those are certainly used in our area. It's not that they're not. They are definitely used in New York, upstate. Saratoga has several of them that would be there. And again, you're going to want to have those at the locations where you're really seeing the higher volume of traffic. That might even be something that you would expect more on, say, Route 50 through town, that your signalized crossings and actually have the sign there for further emphasis. So we can put that in the toolkit as far as a sign and applicability.
Yeah, and I mean, as long as you describe where you would use that.
Gotcha. It looks like Nathan has his hand raised.
Yes, on the intersection of Malta Ave and Hyde that we were talking about, I think on the complete streets, they had a recommendation for a small roundabout. The roundabout was just to slow cars down, because a lot of cars don't even, or they stop at the stop sign, but most likely they just come really fast coming down Malta Ave. So a roundabout, oh, the other end, yeah, Malta Ave and Hyde. So I don't know if that was something that we wanted to carry over from the Complete Streets project and have that recommendation for this. Or I know people don't like roundabouts because it's hard to travel around them or snowplow or whatever, and it's expensive.
Yeah, Sean Raymond here. That would be a maintenance nightmare for snow and ice. If we were going to do some sort of traffic calming there, I would think bulb outs. You know, if you're doing crossings, that maybe consider you know, bulb outs at the corners. That would aid in traffic calming. It's also because you do have on-street parking on Hyde. They dovetail in pretty well that way. It also tightens up the radius, so it would really discourage trucks from turning onto Hyde. That may be a decent alternative.
Yeah, I was going to bring up trucks because those are a real issue in this area.
Wait, Sean, I'm sorry. You're talking about build outs? I misheard you. Are those the ones where they're almost like shoulders, or they make? Is that?
Yeah, I said bulb outs.
Oh, bulb outs. See, I thought I misheard you. Okay, bulb.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's
or bump outs. And the concept at the Complete Streets workshop was a mini roundabout, but certainly there are other treatments that could work too.
Yeah, would be good to see. I don't know if they're on the list here, this bulb out.
They're not. We can add those in as and other options for something like that as far as speed control, especially at an all-way stop, would be perhaps some level, like a raised crosswalk, which essentially acts as a speed table. It's not a speed bump. Speed bumps are a bit more abrupt. A speed table has a wider width of actually elevated space, so it's easier for the vehicles to navigate. And since the vehicle is having to stop anyway, it's kind of a reinforcement of those. The tables, and Sean, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but the speed tables don't seem to be as much of a maintenance issue as like the speed bump, because the blades don't get caught as much.
Right. It's generally more gradual transition.
Yes.
And an example of that on steroids is what they did down on Cohoes Boulevard, where they put the entire intersection is raised along with the crosswalks to kind of create an elevation change in an effort to traffic calm through the intersections.
Great. Bulb outs and perhaps raised. Okay. Let's see. I am just popping back into my list here to make sure Malta Avenue, Hyde Boulevard. So a couple of the last things that were talked about and I hope I'm not making anybody dizzy with kind of the moving of the map here, but complete a study to determine the benefits and trade-offs associated with implementation of an exclusive northbound phase at the New York Route 50 Front Street intersection. So the concern had been raised that vehicles that are turning left onto Front Street are basically not able to make that move, that they're getting delayed and then causing delays to through traffic on Route 50 itself. So there are benefits and trade-offs to that. One of the benefits of providing a northbound only phase is that, yes, then you can clear out those left turning vehicles. And then so the idea with the exclusive northbound phase is that your northbound vehicles will continue to go, but your southbound vehicles are stopped. So that allows that left turn movement to operate without a conflict. So that's what clears the left turn vehicles. So, is allowing those left turn vehicles to move unopposed, and then kind of reducing the delay potentially to the northbound through traffic. One of the things that slowed and stopped traffic in the village does is have slowed and stopped traffic. So it's, you know, a slower village setting. It's a little bit easier for pedestrians, a little bit easier for parking, all those kinds of things. So there are definitely benefits and trade-offs to doing something like that. So the recommendation is to take a look at it and determine whether that's, you know, desirable or not.
Alana, Sean Raymond here. If you could just pan north a little bit. So Malta Avenue and Front Street are two separate signals, but they are run off of one controller. It may be feasible here to do a potential split phase system.
Mm-hmm.
It would have to, I mean, obviously that would be farther along in the design phases. You'd have to do capacity analysis.
Exactly.
To determine if, you know, it's not going to basically back up traffic for miles, but yeah, it's, you know, it may be feasible, but obviously if you did a northbound protected phase, then you have to also complement it with a southbound protected phase as well. And then that increases the overall cycle length, which then increases overall delay. So it would have to be modeled and analyzed.
Absolutely.
To determine if that's feasible.
Absolutely. Feasibility both from the analysis piece of things, and I think your forte, Sean, the feasibility of actually like designing and making sure that the signals can accommodate it. So a couple pieces that would go into the feasibility of that particular potential. So that was that recommendation. The next was over at Ballston Ave and West High Street. And I'm going too far. So over in this area, there's concern about the visibility for vehicles turning from Ballston Avenue onto West High Street. So the recommendation is to complete a site distance evaluation at this location and confirm whether the site distance is adequate and meets standards or guidelines, or whether some type of site distance mitigation might be needed in order to improve that visibility for a vehicle turning from Ballston Avenue. That mitigation could include anything from a sign, like an intersection warning sign, or actually if there's a vertical element that's in the way, it could be removing that vertical element, like shaving back an embankment or cutting down a tree. Those kinds of things may come out of a study like this if the site distance is found not to be adequate or meet guidelines.
Yeah, also there is no sidewalk. You know, the sidewalk ends down at I think it's the telephone company building on Ballston, and not that corner, that southwest corner has no sidewalk and has a steep embankment. And I would think, you know, you would want to do something about that so pedestrians could get around that corner and continue on West High. I don't know if that would take like a retaining wall to push, you know, the hill back. and allow, a walk, and that might also improve site distances.
Right, and this is that we talked about at the beginning, that as far as the beginning being at the top of the list area is providing a sidewalk connection that continues over to the county building, and spoke briefly about how this is a difficult spot to do that, which is probably why there isn't one at this point, right? Because of the vertical difficulties that are on both sides of the roadway, and then you also have some sections of guide rail. So this is definitely one of those harder spots that actually it's a bigger project than just let's construct a sidewalk. So that's one of those that we identified as kind of a longer term recommendation, just because of the difficulty in making this happen, and potential costs with the whether you're cutting or building, whatever it may be. It's definitely a much more expensive prospect.
Yeah, and you didn't really have any accident data there, and when I think there was within the last year or two there was an accident in that area, and speaking to one of the local residents a few years ago, they reported that there were a lot of accidents at that intersection, and I didn't really see any data on that. I would think that would be collected.
The crash data focused on pedestrians and bicyclists, so it didn't actually focus on vehicle crashes.
Okay.
On vulnerable users.
Sorry, I'm going to raise my hand verbally here, Sean Raymond. I just wanted to let individuals know that the Ballston Ave and New York 67 intersection is currently being studied by New York State DOT.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, there's a case study there. And I'm not sure what the outcome will be, but as far as treatments to improve site distance at that location, it would more than likely require a purchase of right-of-way on that corner to do any sort of treatment. And I think that's why nothing has been done yet. So again, the outcome of the case study, may determine that it, there still isn't a cost benefit to acquiring that right away. But I mean, that would essentially be probably the quickest and easiest solution, is to buy some right away and then just through earthwork, cut that embankment back.
Right.
Yeah, there's actually a path on top of it. I mean, it's a vacant lot, and you'll see, because I walked it recently, and I discovered that you can sort of cross that lot. There's a path worn in the grass.
Interesting. Scott, is your hand raised?
No, I don't. Not on purpose.
Okay, just checking.
Hey, I just wanted to ask either Sean or maybe Audrey. I mean, would it be, I know we don't necessarily need all the details on it, but would there be the ability for us to include some language in that recommendation to say, like, pending New York State DOT evaluation, or is it, you think leaving that recommendation there is fine, but just wanted to know, essentially knowing that it's being looked at by DOT, I would think supports that in some way?
Who was that question to?
I mean, Sean, I guess, or Audrey, both. I mean, Audrey is, I guess, representing DOT. I'm not necessarily sure if, I think you're more of a member of the committee, not necessarily speaking on behalf of DOT, but I wasn't sure if, there's any data available that would be able to feed into this at this point, basically, or if that's all very preliminary.
Well, the case study can be foiled.
Okay.
No,
No.
Isn't it sort of good information to have? Like, I mean, could you just make a statement that it's being looked at? I mean, I think it's, I guess I'm not seeing what the problem is. You're not promising.
Well, I guess that's essentially what I would, is there any official information on that? Would we need to foil it, or is there someone at DOT that we could kind of simply reach out to just to have something in writing saying that it's being looked at and we've coordinated? Because I do think this is the first that we've heard of that.
Yeah, it's relatively recent, just within the last couple of weeks.
Oh, okay.
So, Jacob, why don't we just put in the text of the report that as of, October 2021, the DOT is evaluating this intersection? Is that okay? Is that too much?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's exactly what I was looking for or asking, if that was okay, if we could include that. But essentially, I guess that'd be taking, your comment, Sean, as an official statement, right? So it was more or less.
Well, I'm here as a
clearing
committee
that.
member. Like you said, I'm not representing DOT. So.
Right.
Because I can also send a quick foil, Jacob, if that's the simplest thing to do.
Yeah, well, maybe I'll reach out to some folks at DOT.
Simple. Yeah.
And just kind of get a thumbs up that that's happening, and maybe if we need to get more, we can. But
perfect. There's definitely good information. Let's see, and then the final kind of number 15 here, as far as projects and recommendations, is to locate a potential crossing somewhere between Doubleday Woods Drive and Thomas Avenue for pedestrians to cross from one side to the other. The recommendation is really talking about this in respect to coordinating with DOT to see if there is a preferred location, to see if there's something that could be specifically demarcated as like kind of that mid-block crossing in that section. It's a really tough section. I know that this is not something that this is an area that's been looked at before. And it's being a state route, you certainly have to meet certain guidelines and requirements, but it's definitely worth a reach out to say, if something's happening, what can we do? Can you keep this on your radar as you're, doing whatever maintenance or sidewalk work or whatever it may be, but is there a preferred location for some type of crossing? I mean, it was specifically because there are residents kind of in Doubleday Woods and, through this whole area and at the school that go to access some of these restaurant locations down south of the village line. So just recognizing that as a discussion point.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a real need because otherwise folks that live in Doubleday Woods have to go down to East and West High and then back up the other side, and that's basically doubling their travel route to, get to like Stewart's or so. And, I've heard complaints from residents, about that situation, and some of them basically just cross the street, which is not safe.
Alana, this is Ray.
Hi.
Unfortunately, I don't have a hand to raise because I'm on my phone. Up at the state park, just past West Avenue on Route 50, there is a crosswalk that triggers a stoplight if somebody pushes the button.
Okay.
But other than that, the traffic just flows through. That might be the answer for the crosswalk on Route 50, somewhere near Lewis Street there.
So particularly a
Just a
ped
thought.
signal. Exactly the one you're talking about there on Route 50, because it is part of kind of the trail network, right? It crosses between Spa Park and
Right.
where the golf is, and then there's the addition of the
Correct.
trail that goes by the YMCA and all of that stuff.
Right,
Um,
right. And that might be a good option. It's, you know, I don't know regulations and all that, but that might work for folks. And then it's only used when somebody's there waiting to cross.
Yeah, and there is the bus stops as well in that vicinity, and I would think you'd want to make it sort of convenient to those bus stops, because somebody may be, you know, going in one direction and let off, you know, on one side and need to get to the other side.
Right. Okay, so that's after the final of the kind of 15 recommendations that then flowed into this table 8 of potential projects. And then the next piece was really to hopefully kind of talk through a little bit with the list of projects, and then whether timeframe made sense to the committee as a whole, or if some of these things should be adjusted. But just kind of talking through some of that potential project piece and the kind of prioritization as far as low, medium, high, and time frame type of thing. So I guess the first one is that ADA transition plan. It seemed to be a relatively quick fight as far as that goes, but that was just my thought on it. So anybody else, as far as time frame or prioritization?
What is it exactly is in an ADA transition plan that wasn't in this study?
So this study did did essentially what's a base to that ADA transition plan. You kind of know the general, like the general condition of the sidewalks, where there are sidewalks, what's passable, what's not passable, all that kind of stuff. The ADA piece of that is actually it's more data intensive, because it includes things like and making sure that the slopes are appropriate, making sure that the ramps are the correct steepness and those types of things. It gets into more detail with regards to actually being ADA compliant. So it would be an expansion upon kind of that base work that has been completed.
Yeah, and I guess I'd point out too, CDTC does have a separate, or I mean, we have in the past, assuming that it continues, we do have a funding technical assistance for ADA transition plans. So we should make sure that that's added into the funding table as well.
So would we do those in the whole study area or just in where these recommendations are?
That would be a village-wide plan.
Okay.
Which would be kind of the additional, you know, we did only look at sidewalk conditions in our study area. A full true ADA transition plan would be, yeah, village-wide.
Okay.
And would look at more than sidewalk conditions as well. Like Alana said, ramps and grades and things like that.
Push buttons and heights of push buttons and all those kinds of things. But like I said, we can certainly make adjustments to short, medium, long, all of that kind of stuff. So,
well, the time frame is when we would implement, you mean? In other words, long would, I mean, yeah, what's the definition really for the?
Short is being identified as 1 to 2 years. Medium term is like 3 to 5 years. Long term would be 6 or more.
When we would implement that program?
Yes.
Okay.
So Jacob's comment kind of ties into one of my comments too. It's more of a formatting thing, but we have this list of recommendations, and then we have just this long list of potential funding sources, and they're not really tied together.
Yes.
I don't know if there's a way to be specific about, you know, for
There,
this recommendation.
with the, and of course, we're not responding yet. Let's see. I can get to this too. Within the table of potential funding sources, so the project number, the potential project, is going to go in this column here. So it will actually tie direct to the potential projects with potential funding sources and which projects should be looked at with the different funding sources.
Gotcha.
So does this table with the timeframes and the dollars relates to the above list, correct?
It will. Yes, yes, exactly.
Okay,
yes.
good. So when it says complete, yeah, okay, that's clear now.
And my PDF doesn't want to respond. All right, so we talked about the ADA transition plan, constructing a sidewalk on the north side of East Hyde. So it's East Hyde Street from Hyde to Eastern Avenue. So that's that section near the soccer fields, essentially, that would be there. And it sounds like we should expand that recommendation to also include a parking lot at that location. But we're showing this as a medium, kind of a medium term. The sidewalk on one side of West High Street, so over near the county building. Again, this one we're kind of identifying as a long term just because of the difficulty of the project itself. It's definitely going to take, you know, design and funding and all those kinds of things.
So the costs include design costs or just construction costs?
It's construction plus a contingency.
But not design?
No.
Okay, so could you maybe put in something that talks about how much you need to add? You know, if it's a certain percentage or, you know, because we're going to be interested in what's the total cost.
Yep.
You know, for grant applications.
Yes, we can definitely do that. So is there anything that came out of the table that anybody thought should have maybe been like a higher priority? So for instance, most of these are identified as medium, quite frankly, you know, a 3 to 5 year time frame. But let me just pop through the short time frames we had identified. So completing that ADA transition plan was a short time frame. Install a high visibility crosswalk on the east leg of East High Street at Hyde Boulevard with approach signage. So that was identified as a shorter term potential. Providing Sharrows and share the road signs on the northern end of Hyde Boulevard was a shorter term, and then potentially coordinating with DOT in the town of Ballston to identify a preferred crossing location to the south of the village line was also identified as one of those that could probably be done in the shorter term. So the short term were typically identified as relatively smaller dollars and relatively small projects themselves.
Alana, would it make sense to reorganize this list by short, medium, and long?
That does make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was one of my questions too. And then also for the stuff that's related to Zim Smith, if we put it in some type of sequence.
That makes sense too. Okay.
And I'm just, forgive me, I really can't see this, but you've just given us the definition of low, medium, and long. Does that definition appear there? It's a little hard for me to see.
Yep.
Yeah. Yes, a footer at the bottom of the table.
Pardon?
Oh, at the bottom of the table, but we can also put it in the text.
It's useful if it was put up top.
No problem.
Thank you.
In larger type.
Yeah.
Okay, no problem. So that was kind of it with regards to the recommendations and kind of talking through them and kind of piecing together some of these comments from everyone as far as reorganization, adding in the parking lot, including some of the complete streets things that had happened that were previous, and then probably putting in a little bit more definition of the Zim-Smith Trail Plan, because Jason gave us a great update on that. We can kind of use some of that information. Does anybody else have any, general thoughts, comments, ideas that we missed? Spencer, do you have your hand up?
Yes, I do. Going back to the, potential projects, you have dollar figures for everything except for number one. And so when I'm looking at a table, I'm thinking number one's going to be the first thing that we want to do. Now, what's a low cost? A low cost to me is a cup of coffee. So I'm assuming it's more than that. Could we get a range put in there?
Absolutely.
And I know it's going to vary, but I mean, first look, I would be curious because it's on the top. It's going to be the first thing people are going to look at.
Yeah.
Yeah, Alana, let me talk to Carrie in our office and see if she can give a range of estimates, if that was something that we didn't have a good source for.
That would be great.
Thank you.
And like you said, Jacob, there's funding available for specifically doing an ADA.
Right. Yeah. I mean, annually we've been soliciting for that. I guess I probably shouldn't confirm what we may or may not do next year, but right, there is a good chance that there would probably be assistance available through us.
So, Nathan, did you have a question or comment?
I didn't have my hand up, but I do have a question or comment. On Front Street, I don't remember where I heard this, but there was a recommendation to make Front Street a potential one-way and to adjust the parking to either make it more convenient or to make it easier for people to park. And I don't know if that was a recommendation that we want to add to the report.
Right. That was
we had talked about Front Street a few times with the sort of back end parking, flipping the direction of the parking, and then also sort of the seasonal use or shutting down portions of it for seasonal outdoor use. And that was one of my comments that I'd put in the PDF, and I didn't know if it was kind of too broad for this report or if it was sort of beyond the scope of what we were doing here.
Well, I mean, it was talked about.
Yeah, I think we can definitely put that in as far as those potentials as the area might get used differently. Because at one point, and Liz, and just of course correct me, but at one point, the road had been closed and had all the outdoor dining, not most recent summer, but the summer before. And so having the potential to continue to do that was something that you wanted to make sure was a potential, correct?
Right. But it turns out, this last summer, there's only been one restaurant that's, taken advantage of that. And, they had the huge cement blocks. And, from what I understand, they're very interested in using their parking spaces in front of that restaurant as additional seating. And they have very nice barriers, with plants on top. And it's, something that I believe they want to continue because it increases their capacity, but there wasn't the interest, amongst the other restaurants that did do that in the previous year. So I have, I came across an article about, I think it was called Clement Street in Florida, where they, basically created the street in such a way that, without the curbs and, very nicely done, where you could have 2 lanes, 1 lane, close it down. It was a very, I forget there was a name for it, for a flexible kind of street. And I thought that was kind of a, cool idea that would allow, like we just had the car show where we closed the whole, well, I guess the whole street we closed, for the cars, for the car show, but even, allowing restaurants the options of having in-street dining.
Yeah, but we didn't get, I think, yes, we talked about that, but we didn't get much traction at all.
Yeah.
There really was not interest, so I don't think that's something that, I mean, yeah, I don't think that should be listed as a recommendation. Even when it was closed for a short period of time, my recollection, that Sean and Liz can correct me, it was at the most northern end, like between Lau Street and Route 50. So they're really, I think that ship has sailed, personally.
Well, but the issue of should traffic be routed differently through that Front Street area would be, a separate issue from the on-street dining. Although if you did have a one way, you would have more room to do, dining. So.
Well, if you really wanted to sell one way there, you would have to make it a one-way street, reduce the width, and then provide angle parking as opposed to parallel. Because the biggest thing business owners want there is more parking.
Yeah.
Can I inject for a moment?
Yes, please.
This is Spencer Casey. So prior to COVID, there was some preliminary discussion with other trustees and mayor and whatnot about, and business owners in a separate committee or meeting about potentially closing a section of that permanently. And then COVID came, so then it was done temporarily, several days a week. And then this year, there was limited interest because of restrictions and liquor authority and other items to what stopped a few people from business owners being interested 100%. So that's why it was limited this year to one restaurant who partook in the ability to, expand their dining out into the street, and they were very successful. But previous conversations that I got back to before were about doing it permanently, not just seasonally, and then it went to different items to discuss. So it's been a discussion, not necessarily here in other parts. So I don't know if it should be listed here because it wasn't really in depth and discussed here. There's been a whole bunch of different things for property owners, business owners, and patrons, basically to expand basically the park-like atmosphere, Wiswall Park atmosphere onto the street with planters and you know, tables and whatnot. And of course, there was other discussions about maintenance on that too. So that's where that all came from, in my opinion, over the last couple of years.
Yeah, and there was also, I think, the addition of changing some parking spots to be pickup locations, you know, for takeout, which is, you know, so that it's not a regular parking spot, but it's like a, you know, short-term parking lot, a parking space, I mean. So I don't know, Spencer, how much interest do you think if the street was reconfigured? I mean,
there's still interest. I just don't, I'm not sure if it's a priority. I know that my renters in that particular area would love it. Partially across the street is the public parking, and then there's really, I mean, it only affects a couple buildings there, so it's not, and then there's the parking, you know, the parking crisis that is always brought up, which I disagree with, but that's another whole agenda. You know, it depends on what happens down the road with that. So I don't know, like I said, I don't know if it should be added to this. It's been a discussion, and as Scott said, we did discuss it in this committee. So I don't know if it should be added. I don't know how everybody feels. I mean, I would add it if we could get potential funding down the road to create community space and alter street pattern to benefit the majority. I don't see why we wouldn't put it in there, but
yeah,
your call. I mean, that's my opinion.
I'd lean towards including it because downtown is a very important, I mean, it's the center, and I think seeing some potential options, you know, might gather some more interest in looking at an alternative way of handling the traffic and the pedestrian use of that area, you know, particularly between Lau Street and Bath. That's the part we closed off for COVID.
Yeah, I mean, I'll chime in here, and I think early on in the study, we thought that we were potentially going to have a summer of seeing this play out as we were doing this study. And then I think kind of to the points made previously, that didn't happen. So it, I guess, ultimately didn't make its way into the recommendations. I mean, I would say at this point, since we didn't really talk about it in previous public meetings or you know, really debated at length, I mean, it could be a point of further study. Perhaps, I don't know if we want it as a hard and fast recommendation without doing any of that modeling or kind of scenario planning. But I mean, for a point of future study, I wouldn't really have an issue of including it, but to make it a recommendation of one weighing it, I don't know if we should maybe go that far without that data to back it up.
Right, that was going to be my suggestion too, is just to leave it in as something that we look at further as its own project.
Including the ability to close all or part of the street and the routing of traffic and handling of parking.
Right, the parking.
Also, I don't think it should be limited to one street. There's other streets that potentially could be used differently for different uses at maybe different times of the year or permanently.
Okay.
That's a good point.
But in that zone?
I mean, central business district, I guess. I mean.
Okay.
I mean, there's streets that are unutilized that potentially could be utilized. There's paper streets. There's a whole bunch of stuff that our village offers that people don't even know exists. Like you said prior, I'm not sure who said it, but you weren't even sure that that was a street or a walking path or what have you. So, you know, there's other things in the village that could be utilized. So I guess a general statement of further usage for, you know, streets or village property, I guess.
Yeah, there are a lot of streets that are more or less used as parking lots.
Great, we will definitely address that and add that in.
This is Ray again. One of the things that we want to make sure happens too, if we're going to be making suggestions about closing streets, etc., make sure that public safety is brought in, police, fire, and EMS, because we still need access on those streets for fire trucks, ambulances, those kind of things.
Got it.
And I think if there's going to be a study of this area and all of these factors that, you know, maximizing, you know, parking, because I think there are some opportunities to, you know, especially across the street, you know, across from Coffee Planet. Part of it is village owned, and then there's the lots behind, which are, you know, you see where the cars are, and then you see a whole big empty area. Those belong to the residences, but, you know, developing some shared parking and paving and restriping that may gather, you know, 10 or 15% more capacity in that lot. So I think that would be part of that whole sort of maximizing the use of central business district space, you know, for transportation and parking.
Hi, this is Nathan again. I do have based on talking about parking, there's the Saratoga County parking just right next to West High Street is very underutilized. If you just want to go south on your screen. And I think the issue is West High Street is pretty busy. There's no place that is, I mean, there's pedestrian walks, but if there was more of a pedestrian sign, flashing lights, that people would be able to park there and then walk into the downtown area to fix the parking.
Yeah, we actually have an agreement with the county to use that lot on off hours. It's just not signed very well. I mean, I think it says it somewhere, but most people aren't aware that they can park up on the county lot on, you know, evenings and weekends. That'd be a nice little, I guess it wouldn't be a linkage study, would it?
Don't actually know. I mean, they do a ton of different things with the linkage studies, so it could, absolutely could.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Liz. I think I missed what you said originally, but was it? I think referring to a parking or kind of that central business district traffic flow streetscape analysis, that definitely could be a linkage study. Is that what you were referring to, or was there? Okay, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. What else? We've talked about all the various recommendations. We're going to be adding in something about reusing or reclassifying public spaces, including roadways, and looking at some further study with those types of uses, potentially a higher visibility crossing between the county parking lot and kind of getting down to Bath Street. Is there anything else that we need to make sure we're adding in or clarifying?
What did you have in terms of the recommendations in terms of public transportation?
So public transportation, there's really not, and I was thinking about that actually the other day, and I'm glad you brought it up, because there are certain requirements with regards to space in order to actually be able to put a shelter or an amenity or any of those types of things. And those spaces just aren't there. So we need to put in something, because that's certainly a feature. And right now it's, you know, like you said, there are signs, but there's not, especially in kind of that more downtown space, there's not a spot for a pad and a shelter.
Yeah, well, we were talking to Brent, is it?
Yes, Brent Irving. Mm-hmm.
And he is looking at actual, you know, measurements or spaces or things like that. And he is, you know, Liz and I contacted him, and he's looking at that. Yes, and yes, space is obviously very much a problem, but yeah.
I mean, that was even one of the things with the kind of the pedestrian and bicyclist kind of level of stress portion of the report, is that with the existing width of the sidewalk on Route 50, you can only reach a certain level of comfort, essentially, because of that width. And it's not like you're going to be going and making the sidewalk bigger, because you kind of need your roadway space as well. So there are certain limitations within the built environment itself. But would you mind if I reached out to Brent as well and just kind of double checked in and see if there's anything in particular we could put in here?
Sure, I would. I think that would be great. Yes.
Yeah, he's still on the committee. He just wasn't able to make it today, so that would be great. I will reach out to Brent.
Yeah, we'd love to have a bus shelter on either side.
Yeah, well, anyway, yes, thank you.
Excellent, thank you. I don't see any other hands raised, but let me scroll down and make sure I'm not missing anybody here. No, it looks like we're good as far as that goes. So nobody has any other comments for now. That's just fine. Certainly feel free to provide anything through email, give me a call anybody, call Jacob, call Kathy, whomever. And the written comments that were provided will be incorporated into this updated, then what will be the final draft report. And then after having the final draft report, that's going to get up on the website. And then from the website, that'll give opportunity for anybody who wants to take a look at it to go ahead and take a look at it, see what's there. And we will also be advertising the public meeting, which is essentially like kind of the last step in the whole process. We'll take then any comments received from that meeting. Those will get incorporated into both the body of the report and into an appendix, and then we kind of seal up the document, and it becomes finalized for usage, hopefully, right? The whole goal is that these are attainable steps. It's a plan to put into place, a plan to be able to use in the future, and to be able to kind of keep working with it. It's a kind of the basic way of starting, but to get those funding for actual implementation of the projects themselves. So very next, though, on my list is a doodle poll to the entire committee to confirm which of the dates is preferred, whether that would be the 17th or the 18th at 7 o'clock. We're planning an hour and a half space of time, 7 to 8:30. And then most likely via Zoom as opposed to Teams. Hopefully we can get some interaction with any and all who are choosing to attend. And then I think hopefully we would also be able to record that public meeting and post that up on the website. Anytime that anything is recorded, of course, we just need to let everybody know. So that's not a problem at all. If there's anything I missed, feel free to speak out. Otherwise, you get 10 minutes back in your day. 10 minutes.
And then we got another Zoom call coming at 6:30, so it's one of those Zoomy days. I'd really you know, I mean, we're not done yet, but you guys have done a great job. All of you.
Yes.
Thank you. We appreciate all the support. And
Thank you.
these are so much better when people are interested in participating. So thank you. Thank you all for all your time and efforts. It's truly appreciated.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Enjoy your, oh, down to 9 minutes. Time to leave.
Okay.
See you all later.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Have a
Good
good
night,
night.
everyone.
Bye.